Joining me now with more on today in the markets is NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Cheung. So, Brian, the markets were happy today. I think that's fair to say. Is this more about the 90-day pause or what the 90-day pause tells the markets about how far President Trump is willing to go in this fight with China?
Yeah, Aaron, I think what it tells us is that we are likely past the worst of it just in terms of the number on the tariff rate itself, because, yes, you have that de-escalation of the 145% tariff that we were levying on Chinese goods coming into this country. That is now at an effective rate of 30%. But you also heard from the president earlier today telling reporters that he doesn't think even after the 90 days, if there is no, in the worst case scenario, resolution, that he would re-raise it back up to 145%. He said he could go higher from here, but that it would likely not go back to 145% because it is an effective embargo on trade between these two largest economies. So that's the reason why you had the Dow Jones ending the day up over 1,100 points. And I want to point out that if we zoom out, yes, there was certainly a point in time where we were down as much as 11% on the Dow Jones Industrial Average for the year. But now, effective for 2025, we are now only down about 0.3%. So we've essentially now flat, even though despite we've faced all of this volatility here. But of course, the question is, what happens in those 90 days? Can a deal actually get inked? Because this is not a deal today. It's just an agreement to lower those rates, Aaron.
Well, that's the question I was going to put to you. We have 90 days goes by here, right? Increased tariffs could be back in play at that point. What sense are you getting from the world right now? Are businesses wary about that? Do we have a sense of how they will respond with these 90 days or how they're going to spend these 90 days on the markets?
This could potentially de-ice the business activity between the U.S. and China. As we know, during the period of time where Chinese goods were facing a 145% tariff coming into the United States, you had companies that were canceling orders coming out of China. That's a big reason why recent export data that we saw at the end of last week showed that U.S. Imports from China had plummeted something like 21%, while China's exports to other parts of the world, specifically Southeast Asia, had surged. Now that these rates are now lowered to 30%, you could see that some companies might say, you know what, this is a rate by which we could continue to order, even if we would have to raise some of those costs on consumers. You have to remember, 30% is still relatively substantial, all things considered. But again, nonetheless, the de-icing of trade and perhaps allowing this lower rate to resume conversations and trade between the two countries, that has Wall Street certainly excited.
So, Brian, I want to play something for our viewers here. This is the president's economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, this morning on TV. Listen.
Is no country going to see a tariff rate of less than 10% in any of these deals?
That'll be up to President Trump. That'll be up to President Trump. There are some products that perhaps will have exclusions and so on, and maybe some countries have a lot of those products. So, but in the end, we'll see how the dust settles. But 10% is the anchor tariff right now for everybody.
So a 10% tariff on everybody, we know, would have shocked the market 4 months ago, Brian. Are investors and businesses sort of more okay with this idea now, that 10% baseline, compared to what else President Trump has proposed over the last several weeks?
Well, I mean, it shows how much the Overton window has shifted, that now you have companies that are saying, look, 10% will take it, even though 10% is still dramatically higher than where it was prior to this administration taking form and taking the oath on inauguration. Now, I want to point out that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has spoken out since the de-escalation of the conversation, at least with China, where we import so many electronics, clothing, those types of things. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is still warning, look, tariffs are still really high. They said the following: while any agreement that reduces tariffs is good news, it's important to note that even with this China agreement, tariffs are much higher overall than where they were at the beginning of this year. They say that small businesses are still dealing with growing costs and disruptions. So to your point, Aaron, yes, you have the 30% on China, the 10% on the rest of the world. This is still a very tariffed global economy that we're facing. Again, can the administration negotiate with all those countries going forward? We'll have to see.
All right, Brian Cheung for us in New York today. Brian, thank you. And as we mentioned, rolling back tariffs on China this early in negotiations is another apparent 180 for President Trump. So here's some of what he told reporters recently on Air Force One, and some of what he told our Kristen Welker during her recent exclusive interview on Meet the Press.
I'm not going to drop them unless they give us something that's substantial. Otherwise, I'm not going to drop them. It'll all work out.
What movement do you consider substantial from China?
Well, free up China. Let us go in and work China.
Would you consider dropping the tariffs to get China to the negotiating table?
No.
So you're not, just to be very clear, you're not dropping the tariffs against China to get them to the negotiating table. Those tariffs are staying on.
Why would I do that?
Would you lower them?
At some point, I'm going to lower them because otherwise you could never do business with them.
Yeah.
And they want to do business very much. Look, their economy is really doing badly. Their economy is collapsing.
Now, while touting today's news, the president said that tariffs could go back up if no deal is reached in the next 90 days. He also suggested, though, there was a new limit on how high they could go and that the prior rate of 145% was too high.
If a longer-term deal is not reached with China at the end of these 90 days, can the American people expect those tariffs to go back up to 145%?
No, but they would go up substantially higher. You know, at 145, you're really decoupling because nobody's going to buy. But they can go, they got very high because of additional tariffs I applied during the course because of fentanyl and other things. But no, but they'd go substantially higher.
And then on Qatar, Mr. President,
I think you will have a deal, however.
Now, the president's softening on tariffs against China comes after those 145% tariffs threatened to turn U.S. ports into ghost towns. That sparked fears of supply chain disruptions and empty shelves in stores. It also comes after Fed Chair Jerome Powell bluntly warned last week that tariffs could lead to a toxic combination of lower employment and higher prices for the U.S. economy. NBC's Yamiche Alcindor is at the White House for us today. NBC senior policy reporter Shannon Pettypiece is on set with me here, and my colleague Jacob Soboroff is at the Port of Long Beach, California, with a firsthand look at the impacts of President Trump's tariffs on global shipping there. Yamiche, I'll start with you here. Help us understand what went into this pause that we're seeing with tariffs. What do we know about what happened in Switzerland?
Well, we know that those meetings went over went on for 2 days, that there was long nights, that they had to order dinner the first night because they were talking for so long. And both sides came out saying that they made progress and that things were constructive and friendly, and that they essentially had an agreement, at least for 90 days, to pause most tariffs and trade barriers. So essentially, we know that these meetings went well. It's really interesting to me that, of course, President Trump and President Xi haven't directly had negotiations from our understanding, but this is at least a way forward. And the president said coming forward in the next few days here that there are going to be more talks. So essentially things are going well for now, Aaron.
So we know that President Trump recently said he would need some concessions from China in order to lower tariffs. What do you understand about that? What concessions did he actually get with his team in Switzerland?
That's a really good question. Well, we know, of course, that China is slashing their 125% tariff to about 10%, at the same way that the president is saying that the U.S. is going to go from about 145% to 30%. That being said, I think the details of what was given out and what was given, what the concessions were from each side, I think that's the sort of mystery here that we don't particularly know. I think hopefully we'll get some more reporting as we learn more about what happened in Switzerland, but also because these talks are continuing to happen, I know I'm talking to my sources, I know other people are talking to their sources to try to figure out, well, what else are they trying to hash out over these next 90 days, Aaron?
You know, we've talked about some of the warnings that have been out there, right? We've had warnings from companies here in the United States, from market watchers. We had the Fed Chair Jerome Powell last week. Did these worries about rising prices and empty store shelves sort of help move the White House here?
Honestly, I think that these worries helped move both countries. In talking to the White House here, let's remember that the U.S. and China are the world's two biggest economies, and a long-term fight between these two countries would really possibly, experts tell me, damage the global economy, not just sort of prices here at home, not just prices in China, but all over the world. So there was real, I think, there was both of these countries really wanted to try to work something out. It was interesting that the Chinese officials, after this meeting, there was a lot of worry about whether or not the U.S. was maybe saying that there was a deal when there wasn't a deal. But when the Chinese officials came out, they said, look, we don't want a trade war either. So let's try to work this out. So that tells you that both of these countries were very motivated to get a deal done.
All right, more to come here. Yamiche Alcindor for us at the White House today. Thank you, Yamiche. Let's turn to Shannon Pettypiece now. And Shannon, I want to sort of talk about the big picture here because we know that's what you look at. What changed, what didn't change or has not changed since President Trump first put these tariffs, the big tariffs in place back at the beginning of April?
Well, effectively, we're right back where we were before this Liberation Day, which, of course, the president had billed as this moment to liberate the U.S. of unfair trade practices. Essentially, all of the tariffs from them have been unwound. There's been a few added since then, like on auto imports, some sectoral or industry ones. But we're back to where we were when it just comes to the number on tariffs coming in with that flat 10% rate now in effect on all countries. But that big chart we saw from Liberation Day, all those confusing tariffs, those are gone. We're now about 10% for most countries with a few exceptions. But over this month period, even though we're maybe back to that point, a lot has changed for businesses and investors and companies. For small businesses, this month has really roiled them. And the past week was really the moment where things started to get real from a logistics and supply chain. That was when the last of the goods that were on the water when the tariffs went into effect had all cleared through the port, because it takes a few weeks for those to get across the country. And anything else coming in was going to get hit with the tariff. So you mentioned those signs of empty ports, of these supply chain disruptions we had seen before. Last week was when that really started to become a reality, because companies had halted those shipments, halted productions, because they weren't going to pay those additional tariffs.
So I'm curious about your understanding of the end game here for the White House, right? We've had the president bragging about big profits coming into the U.S. government by way of these tariffs that he wanted to put in place. And now you talk about getting back to status quo. What's the end game here? What are they really trying to make happen?
Well, a lot of that messaging on even a political and a policy side has sort of been undone, at least temporarily. We'll wait to see what happens. But I mean, we remember last week the president was talking about how children don't need so many dolls. They don't need all these toys. We don't need this stuff from China. The Treasury Secretary spent weeks making the case that we didn't need cheap, what he called them, baubles from China, that there was a bigger mission here, and that was bringing back companies and bringing back investment in manufacturing in the United States. Down at a 30% tariff, and we'll see where it goes from there, there's not that same incentive for U.S. companies to come back to the U.S., for a toy maker to relocate its production here. So they lose that talking point. They also lose this talking point about the revenue they're going to generate from tariffs. Obviously, they still will be generating revenue from tariffs, but not at that same level that the administration had talked about, really offsetting so many of the other tax cuts and other spending priorities that they had. We
also know that these negotiations with China are not happening in a vacuum. Other countries, businesses, and other places are watching and paying attention. What are they getting? What are they learning from what is happening between the U.S. and China? Well,
there's a few data points now, too. There's obviously the U.K. last week, where there was a deal, but not necessarily a deal on paper. Like this deal, it's not clear what exactly the concessions were from the UK to get things like the tariffs on autos reduced. And there's also, remember, Mexico and Canada have been through this, too, where the tariffs were on again, then off, then on again, then off. So there's a number of countries, Canada, Mexico, UK, China, where we've seen a repeating pattern of the countries essentially holding their ground, not offering major concessions, and certainly nothing in writing or in paper in an official trade agreement form, yet being able to get substantial tariffs rolled back and really continue with the status quo. So I think other countries can look at that as well.
Yeah, well, I'll be watching that. Shannon Pettypiece for us today. Shannon, thank you. Jacob Soboroff is getting a look at the impact of the tariffs up close for us today. Jacob?
Aaron, I'm coming to you from the Port of Long Beach. It's part of the largest port complex in the world. Los Angeles and Long Beach combined have the most cargo volume of any port in the United States of America. This is quite literally one of the biggest economic engines for our nation. But for the last several weeks, and particularly today, we're essentially at a standstill here at the Port of Long Beach. The shipping vessels that would come in, the cargo ships, are so much fewer in number today that some of the port terminals have actually had to stand down because they don't need the workers to come in and unload the ships. The question on everyone's mind here today is, what is the impact of this 90-day pause, this preliminary trade agreement announced between China and the United States? And the answer is, it is too soon to understand the ramifications here. It takes weeks for those ships to come from China and make their way to the United States, sometimes as short as 10 days, but oftentimes over 2 weeks long. They have to actually book those appointments for those ships to be able to come into the port here in Long Beach or at the Port of Los Angeles, which is controlled by the city of Los Angeles, be put onto trucks, be put onto trains, and moved logistically throughout those centers throughout the country for people to buy those products. The products that did come in, the limited amount during that heightened tariff situation will be much more costly, and those costs will be passed on to the consumer. What happens now in these 90 days? People are worrying here. Experts are saying there could be a backlog of ships trying to get in that 90-day pause because we don't know what's happening on the other side. Uncertainty is the name of the game, and you can see it. You know, it's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to hear the experts, the leaders of the ports, politicians, but it's another thing to be out here. I've lived in Los Angeles almost my entire life. I've been to this port countless times. This is one of the quietest moments I've seen at the Port of Long Beach in all of my reporting here over many years. And so I think at the end of the day, what we're waiting for is 90 days. Will ships come? If they will there be enough logistical operations here in order to bring those ships in, unload those goods with the reduced tariffs? Or will we have a backlog like we saw during COVID of dozens of ships stacked out into the Pacific Ocean? There's one ship coming in right now. One ship coming in is a lot fewer than they're used to here, Aaron. And so we're going to keep an eye on it, and I know that people back in Washington will as well. Aaron?
Jacob Soboroff for us in California.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.